into authentic conversations about ourselves and our community, exploring topics that uplift and inspire us. From personal growth to social change. So grab your teacup and get ready to join the conversation.
After a freak off and not domestic violence, is that video going to convict Sean Combs in and of itself?
No. Also, I challenge this idea that because it was after a freak off, it was not a domestic violence. I mean, if you take your partner force them into a group sex situation and then afterwards beat them, isn't that that is domestic violence, right? Maybe something else, an and/or kind of thing.
Yeah. This is a great question. They're all great questions. What I'm telling you, we got a great audience. From Rel, is the freak-off tapes going to be viewed in court? I think the answer is no. I think the answer is no based upon what we heard earlier. If I was understanding the court, and I want to get the transcript on this to be 100%, but it seems to me, because of the sensitive nature of this, it's not going to be viewed for the entire courtroom gallery, but the jurors are going to hear it. They might have headphones in. Right. The way the questions are asked of the witness regarding what's occurring in the videos will be careful. That's what I think you have to do. Yeah,
let me explain. I think this will help how these courtrooms are set up, because I've tried cases in the federal building that they're in now. So you have in the front, there's the judge's bench, and the judge has a computer screen where he sees everything, and the witness box has a computer screen where the witness sees everything. And the jurors have multiple video in the juror box, so they can view it right there, and counsel have videos on their tables, on counsel tables. If you're sitting in the back in the galley, there is a big video monitor where usually whatever is being shown to a witness and the judge and everybody else is also displayed from the gallery. As I understood the back and forth this morning, they're trying to not have the worst evidence on that big video screen in the gallery, so that people who are just there to watch it won't see it. And they're also hooking up the jurors with headphones, so you won't hear the audio in the courtroom. So some of that stuff is going to be a little shielded from the public. And I'm not sure it's going to be filed on the public docket where anyone can get it.
The worst thing is if that gets released. That's the worst thing. If that gets released, that's a big problem. Okay, so we are going to take a break. We're waiting for Elizabeth Milner to come on. We're going to get her up in a second. I really want to know, how did Cassandra Ventura testify? It's one thing reading it off the transcript. It's another thing, how did she behave? What was her demeanor like? How was she answering the questions? How was the jury reacting to that? So we're going to get up that in a minute. Before we do, I thank all of our viewers for continuing to come on, watch us as we're breaking this down in real time. But one of the reasons we are able to put on this live show for you is because we get incredible support from our amazing sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. I want to call them out real quick. This is America's largest injury law firm. I'm talking about a firm that has secured a $6 million verdict for a car crash victim in Florida, $13 million for a wrongful auto death in Georgia, and by the way, $6 million for a trucking accident. The prime focus of this whole case has been testifying, and currently they're on a lunch break, but right now I want to go live to Law and Crime's very own Elizabeth Milner, who is outside of the federal courthouse, was inside that court for when Cassandra Ventura was testifying. Elizabeth, it's great to see you. I know you have to jump back into court quite quickly, so let's first start off with Ventura. She takes the stand. How did she appear? What are some of the highlights of her testimony? And most importantly, how is the jury responding?
All right, Tea Sippers. As you guys just heard from Law and Crime, we are up on the day 2 of the Diddy trial. It's underway and it is explosive. And as they are getting the top of the moment, top of the minute, up to date, live by live, play by play testimony in the Diddy trial right now. So are all my sippers. I want to thank all of y'all for making sure that when I come live, y'all come alive with me, okay? And y'all subscribe and like, and we're growing. So it's just a really good feeling to sip this tea with y'all. Unfortunately, it's not in such a good light, but you know, some people put their life in places and spaces. We just have to be here to sip the tea. So right now we are getting up to date live to live minutes from Cassie Ventura's just a recent last up-to-date testimony, okay? So remember, like and subscribe, y'all. Let's get into it.
Responding to her testimony.
Yeah, well, Jesse, when she had first kind of entered the courtroom, can't necessarily describe it as a tense moment necessarily, but I can only imagine what was kind of going through everybody's minds. You have Diddy's children on one side, his family on one side. You have Diddy, who was looking at Cassie as the moment that she walked inside that courtroom today. She was wearing a long brown dress. She is very, very much so, appears to be in her 3rd trimester of her pregnancy. And so she kind of walked very quietly and very slowly up to the witness stand, took the, swore the oath and that type of sort, and then sat down for the prosecution's questioning. And as far as who her support was inside that courtroom, that included her brother, what we presume to be her mother, as well as even her husband, Alex Fine. And he was kind of the topic of some of these arguments outside of the presence of the jury, mainly about just some testimony that they're expected to happen, especially later on today or even possibly tomorrow, because she is expected to be on the stand for a while. But as far as when she got onto the stand, she was very soft-spoken when she was answering ASA Emily Johnson's question. We've been following this case from the beginning, from the moment that she had filed that federal lawsuit that was just very shocking, a very bombshell lawsuit that we all know was settled the following day. But as far as just kind of comparing the allegations to her witness testimony, it was kind of a difference in the sense that we had only seen her allegations through words, through paper, through court filings and that sort. But, when she got on the stand, it's now, for jurors in their minds, they're putting a voice and they're putting a person to, a name finally. They're seeing just from her side of the view, just kind of her relationship with Diddy. Much of the testimony was very foundational. When did she meet Diddy? How long before, the two engaged in sexual intercourse, as well as, she was briefly asked about the CNN video, and she did confirm that she was leaving a freak off when the vicious beating kind of happened. As far as just some other big highlights, we were shown a lot of photos of her and Sean, as she refers to him in court, as well as her friends. We saw a photo of him being Diddy, Kim Porter, another friend, and Cassiel at the 2006 BET Awards. We saw a photo of Diddy with Cassie, another friend, and another potential witness to this case, all sitting on a couch. We had seen photos of their trip to Miami. We saw photos of them at a strip club together here in New York City in 2007. For Halloween, she had spoken about just, her time working as an artist for Bad Boy, and just that pretty much, some of these allegations she had talked about in her lawsuit, but also that Diddy controlled a lot of aspects of her recording career. She signed a 10-album deal. However, she only put out one album. Sort they were leaked and that type of sort. And so some of those were like kind of the big highlights, I would say. They were kind of touching base on who all else kind of played a role in, as far as, security. She had named people like D-Rock and Bounds and Uncle Paulie and Malik. As far as assistants, we heard one of the big names being Christina Coram, as well as David James, Neil Dominic. And so that was kind of touching base a little bit as far as, how Diddy's staff kind of interacted with her. But for the most part, another eye-opening point was just that, Diddy had security around him 24/7, but she also had said that, sometimes the security's job was to kind of check on her and make sure that she was doing what she was supposed to, essentially, that, if she wasn't answering the phone when Diddy had called, that he would send his security to go and find her. And so, as far as just some of the testimony, I'm sure we'll get into more details as far as kind of, the freak offs and that type of those types of allegations. But, you know, it really did start off pretty foundational. And I was pretty surprised at, you know, how composed she was keeping it all while on the stand. Again, she was very soft spoken, but she answered the questions directly. If there was something that she was confused about or wanted Emily Johnson to rephrase or just to ask again, she was open about that. You know, there were very brief moments of laughter, but that was just because, you know, it was nothing that had to do with any of those graphic allegations or anything like that. But it was just, you know, pretty much she was asked, like, why didn't you release more albums? And she's like, is that a question for me? And then there was a little chuckle, but for the most part, it was very much a serious tone. A lot of eyes were on Cassie. A lot of eyes were also on Diddy's children when they were talking, you know, for example, about Kim Porter and just how that relationship had ended while Cassie was starting her relationship with Diddy. And so we got to kind of see finally for a while now, because it's almost been 2 years since she had filed her lawsuit at this point, that we kind of got to see her explain her own view from her own mouth, as opposed to us seeing these allegations in like lawsuits and that type of sort.
So I have two questions for you. One, how is the jury responding to her testimony and more of the graphic points of her testimony? But also, what was Diddy doing? What was Sean Combs doing? Was he looking at her? Was she looking at him at any points? So again, what was the jury's reaction and what was the reaction between Diddy and Cassie?
Well, let me tell you, it was a very packed courtroom, so it was really hard to kind of see all the jurors in their faces. But from the little view that I got of just seeing these jurors, they were listening intently like they have been even since yesterday, taking notes, kind of watching back and forth, both, you know, the prosecution asked their questions and then going over and kind of looking at the witness, that being Cassie, while on the stand. Now, as far as Diddy goes, he was watching very intently. Like, let me tell you something. He is very much so participating in his defense, jotting notes down. He's passing these notes because we do know when the cross-examination comes down, it's going to be Ana Maria Esteval who's going to be doing that line of questioning once the defense does get to the cross of Cassie's testimony. But as far as Diddy goes, he definitely kept his eyes on Cassie for the most duration while she was on the stand, which I can only imagine was felt intimidating on her end. Possibly, I'm obviously not in her mind, so I don't know that 100% or anything like that. But as far as Cassie looking back in Diddy's direction, even when she had gotten off the stand, you know, she didn't look at him once. She just walked immediately outside through the gallery, didn't look at him, didn't look at his children. There was no type of like soft smile, none of that. I think, you know, even she might not have noticed her husband was right there in the courtroom too, but she kept laser focused, got out of the door, and then that's when everybody else kind of left the courtroom for lunch break.
Pretty surreal, to say the least. Let me ask you this. At the beginning of the day, we kind of got a sense of what's going to happen next. Everybody's been talking about the freak-off tapes or these sex tapes and how they're going to be visible in the courtroom, whether or not the gallery is going to see these tapes. I imagine when she's going to have to talk about these tapes, she's going to have to view these tapes. What was the discussion earlier this morning regarding the tapes, how a witness will be questioned about the tapes, and whether or not anybody in the gallery will ultimately see them?
Yeah, so there was a lot of concerns about these exhibits, mainly more so, I guess, from us on the press ends portion, you know, just seeing that these photos were sexually explicit and very graphic in nature. The government planned to show some of these images because they, according to the government, were 6 still images. They were nude images of victims that were sexually explicit, but the government kind of came up with a solution that, you know, they would provide headphones to the jurors so that way, you know, we wouldn't hear any type of audio of, you know, these exhibits that were going to be portrayed. The government.
They are going to have them wear headphones. So the jurors will be wearing headphones currently, okay, while listening to the freak off audio.
Wanted to keep this material out of public record. The defense, meanwhile, says it's pretty much adult pornography, and so that's when we kind of started connecting the dots that these were, you know, videos and images of, you know, these freak-offs that the government is kind of talking about that's central to their case. The defense says it's a privacy issue, and they question what us in the press would pretty much do with these types of images. And you know what? We have a right to kind of talk about them, especially not in a salacious manner or anything like that. I don't think that was any of our intents on, being in the courtroom while these images were played or anything like that. But apparently it seems like, a point for the defense that, they were just wondering what the press would do about it, especially with so many eyes on this case. And so, they wanted to address this issue. The media did have a response through a lawyer. Not 100% sure what outlet they were with, but the media's response was pretty much that the press needs to see these. The testimony isn't necessarily suitable for these images because, the big question is, was this consensual or was this coerced? And so the media lawyer, offered maybe just the pool reporters to see these types of images, so that way there would at least be some media in the room, so that way we could report about this. And so from the media's response, they completely objected to total sealment of these images and says that it's a First Amendment issue. And so this is going to be taken up probably at a later time, possibly when we all come back from the lunch break, just to kind of get a better picture of it. But it seems like, from both parties that they're kind of fearful about these images getting out. But on our side, we have a right to report on what's going on. I mean, look at just the media campouts just behind me. A lot of people have interest in this, not just for salacious headlines or anything like that, but because this is a very high profile and criminal case. And of course, we will respectfully report on it if we are able to see these images.
Real quick, Elizabeth, I want to get you back into that courtroom. 30 seconds. If you could just explain what the scene is like today.
Well, the scene is very much so a lot of high energy, a lot of anxious energy, and maybe I'm just saying my own personal feelings because it was pretty tense this morning as a lot of people were just trying to battle to get inside that courtroom because everyone wanted to be in there when Cassie took the stand. Everyone wanted to see her raise her right hand, swear an oath, and to get inside that courtroom. So there was a little tense moments from people either cutting in lines or people trying to get ahead. As well. But as far as, from the family's perspective, I had mentioned yesterday that the daughters had walked out during Daniel Phillips' testimony. That wasn't the case today. Everyone stayed in court, stayed in place. They were listening to all the testimony that was going on today. And so for the most part, it just seems like, okay, this is day 2. A lot of people are just wanting to know more information. What are we going to be getting out of this case? Is this a criminal case, or is this, very much so possibly a domestic violence case, as the defense is trying to kind of paint it out. But as far as the mood inside that courtroom, it's very tense, I will say, mainly because a lot of people just have their eyes on this very important testimony from one of the biggest witnesses and one of the biggest players inside this case today.
Elizabeth Milner, thank you so much for being our eyes and our ears about what's happening in that courtroom. No cameras, no audio equipment, but we got Elizabeth, and she does a fantastic job. Thank you so much. And I know you have to head back into court. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks. Thank you.
We have just, excuse me. Once again, I'm sucking on these salt and pepper roasted sunflower seeds. Yeah. Excuse me. So we just heard the inside reporter from Lion Crime that's getting, inside up to date testimony on the Diddy Cassie case, right? Diddy Feds case. So day 2, she said Cassie is, like not paying Diddy any never mind, which is a great thing. He's not able to like look into her soul like he thought he used to do and control her. So, that's always a wonderful thing. She's not, allowing him to get into her head and deter her from, testifying to whatever she needs to do for the testimony in Diddy's Feds case. They will be wearing headphones on all the freak off audios, things like that. I don't know what they're going to do a video, though. Probably put them in a separate room. So, Cassie is, I guess, done for the day. So we're going to continue to listen in on notes of day 2 of Diddy's trial. It's underway and exploding.
All right, so we're going to continue to take your questions. I am here once again with trial attorney Rich Schoenstein. So, Rich, you heard that description, okay? You heard the description about her testimony. We've been talking about it, hearing the jurors' reaction, hearing, by the way, how Cassandra Ventura responded, or lack of response, towards Diddy, not even looking over his way, him staring intently at her. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it's hard for a witness. What's the right thing to do? Is the right thing to look at him? Is the right thing not to look at him? I think probably not looking at him is better optics as she takes the stand. I think that's fine.
When she's going to be in a position where she has to watch these tapes, presumably that's what's going to happen, and have to be questioned about these tapes, both under direct examination and cross-examination. I know Elizabeth has said she's very calm and composed. I wonder if things might change then and what we should take away from that testimony.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough thing to do. She's going to be asked about the tapes. She's also going to be asked to describe what's happening. She's going to be asked to identify people who are in that video. She's going to be asked to, identify the prostitutes, right? Because that's a big part of this case. So who is paid to be there in these videos? And she's almost going to have to do like a play-by-play, and it's incredibly uncomfortable. I don't know how she's going to deal with it.
I think the most significant parts of the tapes are if you see or hear Sean Combs directing her,
right,
and particularly in a aggressive manner to take certain steps or actions, that will go towards sex trafficking.
Yeah, and she's probably been through these tapes. I mean, they've taken her through them many times to prepare for the trial, to go over, to get the case ready, to figure out who everybody is. So it's a little different when you get on a witness stand and do it in front of a jury, but it's not the first time she's looking at it.
We're taking your questions right now again on YouTube as we wait for the testimony of Cassandra Ventura to resume. Question from Nomad.
Oh.
How many kids did 7 children? Question from
So she's just at lunch. She's not done for the day off the stand. She will be coming back to resume testimony.
Sarah McGowan. Can charges for co-conspirators come from this trial?
Well, I don't think they come from the trial necessarily. They come from the investigation leading up to the trial. And it's a question here whether the government wants to bring charges against co-conspirators or others. I think they were more interested in having witnesses. I said when this all started that probably people were deciding if they were going to be witnesses or they were going to be defendants, because I bet the government brought some pressure to bear on that decision.
Question from Alpha and Omega Forever. Will the prosecution subpoena other celebrities seen in the evidence later in the case? That's presuming there are celebrities that are, well, let me rephrase. In the lead up to this trial, during the jury selection process, there was a people and places list, right? Does the jury know any of these people and places? There were some celebrity names on there. Doesn't mean they're in the tapes, doesn't mean they're part of relevant evidence, but will the prosecution subpoena celebrities in this trial?
Yeah, I don't know. That goes back to the discussion we were having. Is it actually in the prosecution's favor to drag other celebrities into this and make it maybe seem like a Hollywood thing? If they had certain people who had important testimony to give and were willing to cooperate and do it, then they might want to put it on. But I don't know if that's happening.
Question from Rachel Wisson. If people outside the courthouse admit they're trying to influence the jury, not just protesting, could they be held accountable for that?
I don't know if they can be held accountable. You know, we see this now in trials. There's a trial some people are watching in Massachusetts where
That person that tweeted that, she must be talking about Jaguar Wright. As y'all know, Jaguar Wright is on the scene, girl, down to the courthouse in New York where Diddy's being tried at. Yeah, so she must be talking about her. If there's anybody that wants to see Diddy convicted and sentenced, it's Jaguar Wright, okay?
there's been a big fight about who can be in front of the courthouse and how far do they have to
Karen
be from
Reed,
the
for anybody
courthouse.
who doesn't know.
Yeah, that's it. You've heard of it. So if it starts to be a problem, then the parties can address it with the court. And the court has some power to say, yeah, we're not going to let anybody line up where the jurors come in and out because that would be hard for them, right? That's the one thing you don't want them doing is influencing the jury. Otherwise, people have a right to be outside the courthouse. They have a right to make their opinion known.
I will tell you, the time that I saw this in a way I've never seen before was Johnny Depp, Amber Heard. When I was in that courtroom, when Amber Heard was testifying, the courtroom was filled with Johnny Depp supporters. And I will tell you, as she was testifying, there were snickers, there were people murmuring under their breath. The court deputy had to come over and tell people to be quiet. That created a different environment, and I didn't like it. And that was a problem, because from a purely legal point of view, you don't want that outside pressure on the witnesses, on the court, on the attorneys, on the jury. I didn't like it.
So now you're talking about a different thing, because there's all sorts of opinion and discussion on social media. And then there's people outside the courthouse. But what you're talking about is people inside the courthouse. And that conduct, the judge absolutely should have an iron fist about. And if there's a person watching that trial who snickers, they should be out of the courtroom.
Yeah.
Right? That should be instantaneous. And if necessary, I'm big on public access. Trials are supposed to be accessible to the public. But if that public access interferes with the fairness of the trial, then it needs to be addressed. And then you need to put some guidelines, you need to put some guardrails on it.
Got a question from Sham Adam. I have a question. What has Cassie's domestic abuse have to do with the RICO case? Are they related?
Yeah, well, I think that domestic abuse includes making her have sex acts with prostitutes. That relates to transporting prostitutes across state lines or transporting them for criminal activity. I think it's all interconnected. I don't know whether the actual physical abuse is itself a predicate act. I don't know that.
So this goes to another question from Stephen Plantain. What kind of technology will be used in the courtroom to allow the jurors to view any video evidence, one big screen or individual screens for each juror? I'm going back to what was reported earlier, and Elizabeth was talking about it too, where the public has a right to know what's happening at the trial, that we wouldn't show the videos. The prosecutor says we wouldn't show the videos to the courtroom gallery. The jurors and everyone in the well would wear headphones. So it does become a question if they have individual screens. Yeah, and so it becomes what's going to be in the sealing order. But you heard a little bit from Elizabeth too. But the jurors are going to have quite the view of that video.
The jurors sit in the Southern District of New York. There are 2 rows of jury seats, and there are video screens in front of them. I don't remember if it's 1 screen per juror. It is.
But that's common. You can have that.
It is, but it is multiple screens. So they're watching it on a screen. That courthouse typically isn't set up. Some courthouses have 1 giant screen where everybody watches it, and then you can't shield anything from the public because everybody can see it. But
right.
I think most of the courtrooms in the Southern District have individual screens for the jurors and then a screen for the gallery that you can shut off.
Yeah. We have a super chat question from Mindy H. Thank you so much, Mindy. Really appreciate it. Did Cassie sign an immunity deal in order to testify? So you couple that with what we talked about before. If she is really a participant.
That's a great question, because you see how, you could become a witness and then turn around and be tried as well. If you're implemented in crimes, it happens every day. And did she sign an immunity?
In all of this activity, although it becomes a question, how are you a participant in your own abuse? That would make sense. I don't think you could be a participant in your own sex trafficking, but did she sign an immunity deal to testify?
I certainly would have asked for one if I was her. I
Really?
don't know. Oh, absolutely. She's the star witness in this RICO trial against Sean Combs. They want her.
Meaning she could be a participant in other people's abuse or alleged abuse.
Yes. So she should have said, if I'm going to testify to all of this stuff, then I want to make sure you're not going to prosecute.
Exactly.
Because in theory, some of the things she's being asked, she could have taken the Fifth. She's participating arguably in some criminal conduct. So for her to agree to do that, I wouldn't be surprised if she has an immunity agreement.
It was ruled that her husband, Alex Fine, would be allowed.
So let's see, sippers, if we can trudge up whether or not Cassie signed an immunity agreement. under her testimony agreement for this case against Diddy.
To be in court for parts of her testimony. There was a back and forth discussion about whether or not it should be permitted because he may be called as a witness depending upon what she says on the stand. What's your take on him being allowed to be in the courtroom, and why could that be an issue?
Okay, so typically you have an exclusion order that witnesses can't be in the courtroom prior to their testimony, right? So most fact witnesses aren't allowed in the courtroom to see what other fact witnesses had to say. That's for the sanctity of their testimony. You can make exceptions to that in special circumstances. And so someone said to the judge, given everything in this case, she needs the support of having her husband. And by the way, he is a tangential witness. Like, I don't even, like, do you know what he's going to be asked about?
Maybe if she ever made any mention about maybe the
Yeah.
lawsuit.
But
maybe
that's
the lawsuit.
But that's tangential. He's not a victim. He's not claiming he was abused by Sean Combs.
Well, I think a big theme is her filing the lawsuit, right? Yeah. And the question would become, you know, did she mention anything about, you know, her intentions of filing a lawsuit or settling the lawsuit? I don't know.
Right. Well, the judge balanced those things and decided that he can be in the courtroom. I don't have a problem with that.
So we've been running a number of polls on YouTube, and thank you so much for your participation. I think it's quite illuminating to get your responses to this because you wonder what the jury might be thinking. Question, do you believe the settlement between Cassie Ventura and Sean Diddy Combs indicates guilt? You ready for this? 80% say yes, 20% say no. Wow.
No. I say no. I would be in the minority of this thing. People settle lawsuits all the time, even if they think they might win in court. Just the idea of litigating sometimes. Forget about being a star. You have a lawsuit, it's going to require you to expend so much money on lawyers. You're going to have to go to court. It's going to tie you up for a couple years. Then you're going to go in front of a jury who's going to decide this claim, and who knows what they'll decide. So lots and lots of people, for business decisions, settle litigation even though they don't think they're liable. Happens every day. It does not prove guilt in and of itself.
This is your specialization. So if anybody has the right opinion about it, it's Rich Schoenstein. Okay, question from Allie Jones. Will the videos be made public ever?
No.
You know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question.
Probably
I know,
not.
You know, I was listening to Elizabeth Milner, who was reporting from outside the courthouse, and she's fantastic. I've been on with her many times.
Somebody might leak them.
And she was saying, you know, the people in the media, they want to have access to it so they can report on it, not for any salacious,
Sure.
you know, just so they can report on it. Yes, I would trust Elizabeth with those videos. There are a lot of people on the YouTube that I would not trust with those videos. There are people who want access to those videos to turn them into money-making endeavors one way or another, and potentially to embarrass the people that are in those videos who aren't on trial for anything. So I think there are some pretty serious privacy concerns here.
I agree. I don't necessarily, look, I'm in the media. I think that there's an issue to report on what's being seen because it's a piece of evidence. However, I don't necessarily believe it should be released. I think there's just too much danger. I think the risk outweighs the benefit. Okay, so again, by the way, the reason we're showing you courtroom sketches, the reason we're having Elizabeth Milner come out and do a play-by-play of what happened in court, the reason Rich and I are on air right now and doing live reporting about Cassie Ventura's testimony, which is about to start up again, is because there are no cameras in the courtroom. There's no audio in the courtroom. It's not like Lori Vallow Daybell. I think that is a big issue. I think it's a problem. I've heard the counter arguments before. It might raise a risk of ensuring a fair trial, that there could be a risk to the jurors, there could be an issue for the lawyers, the judge. I don't buy it. I think that this is a case of too much public interest involving very important issues, but yet the federal courts have never changed on that.
Yeah, the federal courts and also New York state courts don't allow generally cameras in the courtroom, and I hate it. I'm a big believer in public access to the courts, especially these days, because we have so much second guessing about the court system and complaining about the court system, and this judge is biased and this judge needs to be impeached and people get treated favorably. And there's no better cure to that than to let people inside the courtroom and see how a trial works and see what a judge really does and see how a jury deals with it. And especially in a case like this, that's high profile, and by the way, has some very important issues in the trial as to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable conduct, what is consent and what is not consent. These are issues we should be thinking about and talking about. They should allow cameras in those courtrooms. Absolutely.
And look, you know, we're trying our best to take the transcripts, the actual verbatim transcripts, use them in our various shows that you can check out on YouTube. We're also experimenting with this AI recreation, so taking the transcripts, using them to create, again, AI depictions of what was happening in that courtroom. You can check it on YouTube. We're experimenting a little bit with there. So we have a super chat question. Thank you so much. This is from Zenpai. Can civil discovery aid the feds? So I wonder if you're talking about discovery and all the lawsuits, can that be used to help the feds in this criminal case?
In theory, it could. You know, I don't know if those civil suits are really going forward. For the most part, civil litigation in a matter like this will be stayed pending the criminal investigation. Because, for example, you can't take a deposition of Sean Combs while he's under trial for federal crimes. So usually the civil litigation actually lags behind. But if there is discovery, it could be used. And certainly what the victims have, right? You would think somebody from the federal government has called every single person who's brought a lawsuit against Sean Combs to ask them about the facts and to try to get whatever evidence they have.
Got another question from Danny. Danny asked a question earlier today. Got another question. Should Diddy have taken the plea deal? Right? There was reporting that he rejected a deal. Now, when this case first broke, I was of the opinion, there's no way he's taking a deal, right? He's rushing towards a trial. It's remarkable that you have a trial going at the federal level in under a year from an arrest and indictment. To me, not only did he feel that he could beat the case, he didn't want to spend one more day in lockup. And I didn't think he was going to take a deal. I didn't think it was likely. He apparently rejected some sort of offer. We don't know what it was. Guests have said to me, as this case progresses, as this trial progresses, he may actually want to take a deal in the middle of the trial. I don't know if it would still be on the table. Your thoughts?
Well, I expect some sort of deal. The question is, what is the deal, right? Should he take a deal? I assume there's no offer they would ever make him that doesn't involve jail time.
And I would say double digits.
Double-digit jail time. I agree with that. So now you have a real quagmire for him, right? You have a real decision for him to make. Do I want to agree? And we have viewers who think him entering into a civil settlement of a civil lawsuit is confession of wrongdoing. How do you think they're going to feel if he takes a plea deal, right? Yeah. So it's a public relations disaster. It's jail for a long period of time, and it's a concession by him. I mean, would he take a deal? I bet if you offered him a year in jail, he would take a deal, but I don't know if you're saying 20.
Yeah, it does become a question when you're looking at potentially life in prison and on the sex trafficking charge, minimum 15 years in prison. I've got a question from Negi. Is it possible with his power, celeb status, that those testifying change their mind based on being scared of him? It's an interesting question considering we have this problem with alleged victim number 3 and her testifying, not testifying, can be found, not be found. What do you think?
I think it is a concern certainly that the government would have. I think that's something they had to think about with every single witness they wanted to bring in as a potential victim. And I think it is a motivation to get those victims on the stand as soon as possible.
We answered this already. This was a question from Jesse K. Do you think there's a chance that Diddy will plead guilty at some time during the trial once he realizes he might be going down to get a lesser sentence? We talked about that. Cassandra Ventura is going to continue her direct examination. It's 1:13 p.m. Not exactly sure if that's going to continue for the rest of the day, and then they get to cross, maybe tomorrow. cross-examination of an alleged victim, star witness in this case. Case rises and falls based on her testimony, I personally think. How do you cross-examine her? She's, 8.5 months pregnant? By the way, we're going to be releasing courtroom sketches. We're kind of a quick glimpse of them. She looks quite pregnant, okay? My question is, how do you cross-examine her if you're the defense in a way that doesn't turn the jury against you?
So it is a tough thing to do because you have to cross-examine her. You can't take a pass on it. What I would do if I was cross-examining her is I would try to start by finding some things I could test her credibility on, even if they weren't important. Like if there's something she testified to that I can show is not true, I would put that in front of the jury so they immediately begin to question her honesty. I would spend a lot of time showing the positives of the relationship, the duration, the happy photographs. I'm sure there are social media posts, whatever there was, quotes of her commenting about the relationship. I would spend a lot of time on consent to the various acts that were done. And I don't know that you can do that much. You can't go after this way. You can't go after a victim with that video and her sitting on the stand 8 months pregnant and all you've heard. You can't go up and think you're going to rip her to shreds. You have to be really shrewd about this.
Have a question from D. Williams. If you're subpoenaed to show up, you must show up. If they don't, you're going to get arrested?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fundamentally.
But people still do it.
I mean, well, sure, but also where were you, you have to be a certain distance from the courthouse to be subpoenaed, so there's some issues. But yes, people duck subpoenas.
I have a question for you. I want to circle back to day one, yesterday. The first witnesses who testified, the security guard who had worked at the LA Intercontinental Hotel, the whole Cassandra Ventura tape, David Phillip, this male performer who claims he was paid to have sex with Cassie, comes watched and pleasured himself, baby oil, Astroglide, that whole stuff. Do you think those were good witnesses for the prosecution?
I think they were fine. The security guard is good because he has no real skin in the game.
Yeah.
He's just a security guard, so he kind of has instant credibility, and he brings this tape into play.
And police officer.
And brings into play immediately the idea that they were trying to buy the tape to hide it, which I think is an important part of that whole story. So I think they were fine. I think it would have been weird to be like, okay, we're done opening statements. Witness one, here's Cassie. I think that would have been too soon.
Well, again, and I said, David, it was Daniel Phillip. Look, I go back to what I said earlier. You establish her credibility. You build it up with other witnesses. You build it up with the tape. So when she testifies, the jury is in a much different position to analyze her. Again, the same thing happened in real time. I think when you talk about her suing Sean Combs in November of 2023, one thing to take away, are her allegations true or not? That video comes out, changes the entire scenario, entire game. You had the openings, though. They were relatively short. I was always predicting that maybe the openings would last the entire day. Relatively short in a complicated RICO and sex trafficking case. Not bit by bit. I imagine the closings will be a bit longer. Is that unusual? Do you like a longer opening statement or a shorter opening statement?
No, short opening statements are smart. Short opening statements as a general matter are smart because you can't go up there and tell the jury everything you're going to prove over 8 weeks. You can't tell them every witness. You can't tell them every piece of evidence you're going to introduce. You can't discuss the law. You can't go over all the counts. You have to give them a general view of the case. And I thought from what I read, both the prosecution and the defense did that. I think an hour is perfect for an opening.
Well, let me also give you an update. Officially, Cassandra Ventura is back on the stand. So we're going to provide you updates and reports on her testimony as it continues. You have to imagine, I don't think I'm wrong by saying that this case rises and falls with her, right? She is the star witness. She is victim number one. There are going to be other alleged victims who testify, but if the jury says, I don't buy it, they're going to go into maybe looking at the other alleged victims a little differently, right? And plus, if they don't buy it and they believe maybe the other alleged victims, you said it before, you can't build a racketeering sex trafficking case on just one victim, or maybe you can. I don't know. I mean, you could, because they're individually charged. There's sex trafficking of victim 1 and sex trafficking of victim 2.
She is the most important witness in the case from what I know, because you have the most serious allegations of his abuse of an individual person about her. And if the jury concluded that that was all nonsense, that she was a consensual participant in a relationship, it would very much undermine the prosecution.
Okay, first update from her back on the stand. Prosecutor asks, who is your manager at Bad Boy Records? And Cassandra Ventura says, James Cruz. What did he tell you? Ventura responds that he was managing me with one hand tied behind his back. He had to check everything with Sean. Why is that important?
Well, because Sean's the head of this alleged criminal enterprise. Everything flows through Sean Combs. So that's what they have to show.
Remember we talked about release of the sex tapes, the freak-off tapes? So we put another poll up there. Should the public have access to trial footage and testimonies? What do you think? What do you think the percentage was?
Should they have access to trial?
Should the public have access to trial footage and testimonies? So I guess that includes everything.
North of 90%, yes.
That's correct. 91% say yes, 9% say no. I'll correct it. I didn't mean actually the videotapes per se, but access to trial footage and testimony. That's my audience. That's the audience we like
well,
to
the
hear.
people who are on YouTube watching us
Yes.
want to see what's happening in the trial, for sure.
Rel asks, what if the hotel video is the only evidence the feds have? It's not the only evidence the feds have.
It's not.
Particularly because it's the Southern District of New York. They don't go against somebody like a Sean Combs unless they have the goods.
Yeah, I don't think this case would be tried in the fashion it's being tried unless the prosecutors were very sure that they had the evidence they needed.
Rachel Stockman, our president here at Law and Crime, has asked a question. Hi, Rachel. Since she is the key witness, do you think it's smart to put her on so early during the trial? I do. I said it before, I'll say it again. I think it was brilliant to not even start with her, but to start with the security guard, to start with the 2016 video, to start with this male performer. You build up her credibility. So when she takes the stand, the jury is a much more beneficial position to evaluate her testimony. It's, again, I go back to what I said. She filed her lawsuit in November of 2023. These were wild, unheard of allegations. You wondered, telling the truth, not telling the truth. As soon as that video came out, it not only corroborated one particular moment in her complaint, arguably corroborated her entire account. She is the star witness. I also think from a practical point of view, she's got to testify early before she gives birth. Right. Because the worst thing about not having victim number 3 is not having victim number 1 testify.
And I'll add one other thing. I'll add one other thing to that. So she's the star witness because of the allegations of what he did to her. She's also, I assume, the witness who's going to cover the broadest topic areas. Right? She was with him for 10 years. So she not only knows what happened to her, but she knows about him. She knows about his businesses. She knows about this alleged criminal enterprise. She knows about other predicate acts. And typically at trial, if you have a witness like that who really covers a large area of what you're trying to prove, you put him up sooner rather than later, because it doesn't make any sense to put on a lot of little witnesses and then bring in the big one.
I agree. Okay, so we have another update from court. Prosecutor asks Cassandra Ventura, how did you make money if your records weren't being released? Ventura responds, I did hosting parties when Sean approved them. What comments did Sean make about your physical appearance? That I look too Mexican with my hair like that. Now, this goes back to what was in the indictment. In the indictment, there was an allegation that Sean Combs controlled all aspects of her life. Her money, her career, her physical appearance. There's a question about medical records. Control is a central aspect of sex trafficking. And sex trafficking is one of the underlying crimes of racketeering, right? I mean, that seems to be the value of that testimony, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. He's directing how she appears. He's directing whether or not she can do hosting parties. He basically has to approve everything that she wants to do. That comment about her looking too Mexican is interesting because that comment is not really relevant to any of the allegations, and it's a little prejudicial depending on who's sitting on that jury because it paints him as maybe being a bit prejudiced.
Well, could the defense work with it and say, he's interested in helping your career? Okay, he's managed a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
He was making a judgment, maybe racist or not, making a judgment about how to help you. He's a concerned boyfriend. He's a concerned
He's a
manager.
micromanager.
Right.
We concede. He's a micromanager. He's got his hand in everything. And, if you think that's too much, so be it. But that doesn't make him a racketeer.
Do you think the strength in numbers of the people who had worked with Sean Combs, if they testify, chiefs of staff, a chef, assistants, do you think that's going to help the prosecution or could it work to their disadvantage? You have so many people who are now coming out saying they're disgruntled, saying they saw issues, but why they keep on working with him. I wonder the strength in numbers argument with the people who are around him.
Yeah, I don't, just from what we know about him and his business success, and really his success story obviously is getting sort of pushed aside because of this trial, but it's really remarkable what he built in terms of entertainment and in terms of business. And so he did have a lot of people working for him. A guy like that had a lot of people working for him. That doesn't make him a racketeer either. And it's interesting if the jury thinks those people show up at trial and they still like him. That could resonate with the jury.
Well, the defense didn't shy away from the fact they're probably not going to like this guy. I mean, they said it, and I kind of respect them for doing that. Doesn't mean it's a defense. Okay, another update from court. The prosecutor asks, how did he like your nails? And Ventura responds, white, French tipped. Prosecutor asks, hair? It varied. I shaved my head in 2009. What about your body? He told me to work out, prepare for the freak-offs. How did you feel about his comments? It varied. So, mixed bag there about what to take away from that. I think, talking about preparing for the freak-offs is something, but the idea of her saying my response varied, I think that helps her credibility, right? And she didn't say, I hated every second of it. I felt trapped. She's right. That helps.
I think she's got to do that. I think it's important for her not to try to come across as a captive hostage at the beck and call of him every minute for 10 years. There's got to be a little bit of nuance there. Because
even though she's the star witness, you don't want her to appear like she's a crusader against Sean Combs. You want her just to.
No.
Why can that backfire?
No, you want to. The most important thing is that the jury believes her.
Correct.
The most important thing is that's more important than what she says, because she's going to say a variety of bad things about him. They had the one thing on video. You want the jury to believe her. If the jury thinks she's a liar, then she could have set up any of this.
The prosecutor asks, this is another update from court. Again, no cameras, no audio. We're doing our best to report back to you in real time about Cassandra Ventura's testimony that's happening right now as we speak. How did Sean pay for, what else did Sean pay for? She replies, cars. Did he give you cash? Yes, but he would take things away depending upon how he felt. What else would he take away? This is an interesting response. My self-confidence. Who would take things away? Staff. That is racketeering, right? The more you include staff, the more you include help, the more you show there's a common enterprise. I guess am I stretching it too much?
No, you're going in the right direction, but there's got to be some more specifics in that testimony. Staff took away my self-confidence. What does that mean? Somebody did something. They have to show specifically what staff did, and they have to show that it was ultimately directed by Sean Combs.
Got a question from SL600. Can the jury view the threat to write a tell book if she wasn't paid as extortion? I don't know if I follow that one.
So was she threatening to write a tell-all book? I don't know what else she would have written after that complaint that was filed in 2023. Did she threaten to write a tell-all book, and is that extortion? It would go to credibility, right?
Yeah.
This idea that she sued him for the money, she wants to write a tell-all book, she's made a deal with the prosecution, she's still marketing herself. Those are all credibility issues that the defense can try to drag out.
Another update. Remember when she said that staff would take things away? So Cassandra Ventura kind of corrected that answer and said, I assume staff. The defense objected. The judge said jury will disregard that last answer. Prosecutor says, who took your laptop and phone? Ventura responds, security. Prosecutor says, how long would they be gone for? Ventura responds, however long I was being punished for. Thoughts?
Yes. Well, that gets at it. When she's being punished, right, she's in a relationship with Sean Combs. So you don't think, even when there's a person who has a lot of staff because he's rich and famous, you don't think of them getting the staff involved in the domestic part. So the staff shouldn't be involved in punishing your girlfriend. And that gets you into sort of predicate act territory.
If you were the prosecution, should you dedicate just a full day to everybody who worked for Combs and helped him facilitate this alleged illegal activity? Do you just dedicate 1 or 2 days, just staff member, staff member, staff member, staff member?
So I don't know how I would do it exactly, but if I was prosecuting the case, I would try to build an org chart. I would try to build a demonstrative I could show the jury that would have Sean Combs on the top and lines that flow down to his various staff members. And then I would add to that demonstrative the specific things those various staff members did to Cassie or otherwise relevant in the case, and try to show that it all flowed down through this enterprise, through this organization.
We have a super chat question. Thank you so much from Get Right 904, Mike a Beast. Why should we care if Diddy's lawyer goes hard at her? She was down for everything. She married his trainer. Of course, Diddy stopped giving her money. Then out of nowhere, she sues. She was finding men and girls. So you have somebody here who has legitimate objections to Cassandra Ventura. Who I think this will be a struggle for the prosecution. You know, I think saying that everything was coerced and everything was against her will could 100% be true, but also may be difficult. I go back to what I said before, it's not a classic sex trafficking case where you have a shadowy organization who is kidnapping girls from another country, selling them off to somebody else. She testifies, explains what happens to her. She was trafficked. This is different. And I wonder if Get Right 904 Mike DeBeast's concerns are legitimate. So I think they are.
As I hear that question, they're asking, why should we care if the cross-examination goes hard? And if you have the views that question suggests, you should care because it could hurt the efficacy of the cross-examination with the jury, who doesn't necessarily, sitting there on day 2 of the trial, have the same views as the person who wrote that question. And you cannot look like you're up there bullying this victim of domestic abuse who's now 8 months pregnant. It's going to get you in trouble.
Would you like some company? Because
yes.
I know I sure would. I love hanging out with you, Rich, and you're going to stay with us. But guess who we got? We got former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani, who's with us right now. Nima, join the party.
Nima.
Thanks so much. Good to see you. So we've been talking about Cassandra Ventura Oh man, almost for 2 hours straight. What are you taking away from her testimony? What do you think there are the strengths of what she said so far? And do you see openings for the defense to exploit?
I do see openings for the defense. Look, she's calm. She's been pretty soft-spoken. She's whispering. Obviously, she's very pregnant, 8.5 months pregnant. I think what I would want to see is how she holds up on cross. I mean, these are softball questions. She did talk about how she fell in love with him, and that really goes to that consent issue, right? How much of this was consensual? How much of it coerced? And you and Rich have been talking about this. So I think what I would want is to see more evidence of the violence, things that Philip talked about yesterday, the hair pulling, the glass being thrown at her, right? Obviously, her being punched, the purple eye. I mean, no human being would consent to those types of things. So the extent that we can have more violence and less just freaky sex would be helpful for the guy.
I think they're building up to that, Nima, right? They say, how did you begin your relationship? Building up the level of control, 17-year age difference, taking things away from her, what she can do, what she can't do, and then you throw in the violence. And I said it before, I'll say it again. It seems to me, Nima, that as soon as the argument comes, well, what happens if she said no, or what happens if she objected, look what happened with the 2016 video. I wonder if they're going to dedicate a significant amount of time to that video and what happened.
Oh, absolutely. And it was a big issue during jury selection and a big issue from the jump. I mean, their first witness was, Officer Flores to authenticate that video, right? And to establish the bribery. So we know the video is everything, and video is everything in any case, because people can lie, but video doesn't lie. And that's how powerful that 2016 video. Frankly, I expected, and I still expect, there to be a lot more video, because Combs reportedly would videotape these freak-offs. I know there was some discussion by the media about seeing those freak-offs, but other non-freak-off related video, because there was a treasure trove of evidence that was retrieved when HSI agents raided Diddy's Los Angeles and Miami homes.
I think that's coming up next. I think it's coming up this afternoon, where she's going to be shown the videos. The jury's going to be shown the videos. She has to describe what's happening. Combs allegedly directing her. That's the
Thanks for watching. Remember to show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It's a blessing. Keep your teacups filled and ready for my next upload. Until then, stay inspired and remember, always stay dipping.